The clink of silverware against china stopped dead, cutting through the room like a gunshot. That was the only sound I heard as my sister Laya squeezed her boyfriend's hand and pulled him toward me. She didn't need to clear her throat to get attention. She knew she was always the center of this room. The Christmas lights reflected in her eyes, twinkling with cruelty as she delivered her rehearsed line. "I'd like to introduce you," she said, a smirk playing on her lips, "to the family failure." My parents laughed. Not a forced laugh, but a hearty one, as if humiliating me was a traditional dessert on the holiday menu. I didn't fight back. I didn't bow my head. I just sat there, gripping my water glass, letting the humiliation roll off me like water off a duck's back. I was used to this role, the punching bag for my family to unload their toxicity on, but Adrian, the CEO Laya was trying so hard to seduce, broke the script. He didn't laugh. He brushed Laya's hand away, his cold gaze sweeping over my parents before landing on me. His voice was low, but echoed through the room as everyone held their breath. "Interesting. Because she's not the one who's finished. You're the one who's fired." That was the moment the axis of my family's world shifted. They didn't know yet that the failure of a daughter they just mocked was holding evidence that could burn their fake reputations to the ground. My name is Serenity Hale, and for 28 years, I lived like a ghost in my own home. But tonight, the ghost decided to step into the light. In our house, the class system was visible right at the dinner table. Laya always sat in the center, right under the brightest chandelier light, her plate heaped with the best cuts of meat served by my mother. And me? My spot was in the dimly lit corner, and my portion was whatever was left: cold vegetables, breadcrumbs, or the smallest scraps of meat no one else wanted to touch. If I dared to complain, my mother, Diana, would reply in a voice soft but sharp as a razor. "Don't be so greedy, Serenity." She said it so often it became the soundtrack of my childhood. Greedy for wanting to be treated fairly? Greedy for wanting to exist? My father, Richard, was even worse. He only saw me when something in the house was broken, a leaky faucet, an unpaid bill, or cleaning up a mess Leia left behind. To him, Leia was the art piece on display. I was the maintenance crew. He called it building character, but really it was exploitation in disguise. I remember clearly the day Leia forgot her homework, a huge poster the whole family had stayed up all night helping her make. When the teacher called home, Richard didn't ask why Leia was so irresponsible. He turned to me, fury in his eyes. "Why didn't you remind your sister?" As if my only purpose in life was to babysit her fake perfection. The breaking point was the year I got accepted into the art program. I ran home clutching the acceptance letter, heart pounding, hoping this time they would see me. But Diana just glanced at it and set it down on the cold kitchen counter. "Laya has a performance that day," she said, her voice dry. "We can't drive all over the place. Be realistic, Serenity." That night, my acceptance letter ended up in the trash. 2 days later, Leia's expensive dance costume was delivered. Money in my house vanished just like my opportunities, quietly and without explanation. The cash I saved from part-time jobs, the envelopes I tucked inside books for drawing classes, it all evaporated. One day, it turned into custom dance shoes for Laya. Another day, it became the entry fee for a beauty pageant she didn't even pass the first round of. When I gathered the courage to ask, my father just sighed, the sigh of a man tired of explaining the obvious to an idiot. "We invest where it matters most, Serenity," he said, eyes never leaving his newspaper. That sentence was crueler than any physical blow. It implied, Laya is an asset, and I am a cost. They never called it favoritism, they called it support. And I believed them, because believing made the house feel a little less cruel. But I wasn't completely blind. I had my own silent rebellion, Every night when the house was asleep, I hid in the old laundry room out back. It was my secret kingdom, smelling of detergent and heat from the metal dryer. There, on the vibrating lid of the washing machine, I drew. I designed ad campaigns, sketched logos, and built a world where talent was defined by the stroke of a pen, not by parental spoiling. I hid those drawings in old envelopes, stuffed behind bottles of bleach where Laya, who never lifted a finger for chores, would never find them. It took me too long to understand. There was never a seat at the table for me in this house. The sharpest knife in the back didn't come at home, but at the place I thought I was safest: work. I was at the office late one cold evening. Laya's voice drifted from the break room, loud, clear, and dripping with disdain. "My sister? She doesn't have a career." She laughed, a high-pitched fake sound. "She just drifts. Adrian only keeps her around out of pity." I stood behind the half-open conference room door, gripping my laptop bag. I didn't walk in. I didn't argue. I just stood there, breathing through the familiar pain tightening my chest. But the next morning, the verbal humiliation turned into action. My concept project file, the result of weeks of sleepless nights, was gone from the shared drive. In its place was a new version, renamed, slightly tweaked to look polished, and most importantly, Laya's initials sat smugly on the signature line. The cursor on my screen blinked, patient and indifferent. A soft knock broke the silence. The intern walked in, shoulders hunched as if trying to be invisible. "I saw her download your file yesterday," he whispered, eyes darting nervously to the hallway. "She deleted the original." I said nothing, just nodded. In the meeting that afternoon, Laya performed the same old song in front of everyone. Serenity has always quit halfway through since she was a kid. She always crumbles under pressure. People laughed politely. But Adrian didn't. His eyes flicked to me for half a second, as if reading something in my silence. I placed my hands on the cold table, offering no correction, no defense. I didn't ask why she was so brazen, because this time I didn't need words. I needed receipts. I didn't go home after that meeting. Instead, I walked out of the office, down the elevator, and plunged into the cold evening like stepping into water. I stopped at a co-working space 2 blocks away. It was empty inside, just white light washing over long tables and the hum of a printer someone forgot to turn off. The smell of stale coffee hung in the air. It was a silence that offered no comfort, but it offered stability. I set my laptop on the table and opened the system access logs. Logs don't lie. They reveal the naked truth of who touched what. Laya's login. 8:14 a.m. Downloaded my concept file. 8:20 a.m. Deleted original. 8:45 a.m. Uploaded her new version. 11:30 p.m. Emailed Adrienne claiming she had fixed my errors. Instead of panicking or crying like Laya always claimed I would, I felt a strange calm spread through my veins. I was no longer the little sister who always gave in. I was an auditor of justice. I copied every log line, every digital footprint into a folder I simply named the documentation. Tonight, I wasn't the victim. I was the hunter. Most people think revenge feels like the heat of anger, but my revenge was cold, methodical, and a series of boring administrative actions: typed, saved, filed. I started collecting everything. I saved payment receipts, transfer records, screenshots of budgets she signed off on without approval. I found emails she sent to superiors, subtly implying I was overwhelmed. She had built a fake version of me in the system to justify stealing my work. At exactly midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from my aunt with a photo of old papers she found while cleaning. It was proof of funds my mother left for me, savings for my future that had mysteriously vanished when I was a teenager. "Your mom wanted you to have this," my aunt texted. I stared at the screen until the blue light burned my eyes, then quietly added the file to the evidence folder. The next morning, before anyone arrived at the office, I went to the old laundromat on the edge of the Aurora district. Down below, the washing machines rumbled, shaking the floor. I pulled out my secret storage drawer. The old hard drives were still there, wrapped carefully in a scarf. I plugged them into my computer and waited. Folders appeared on the screen. The first sketches, the draft concepts, the original styles that later became Laya's signature brand. They were all mine. I didn't take them out of spite. I took them because they were mine. When I returned to the office, Adrian was sitting in the conference room. He looked up as I entered, his gaze sharp. "Sit down," he said softly. He turned his monitor toward me. It was the project file Leia had claimed as her own. Her file. He tapped the corner of the screen. But the metadata inside still has your name. I wasn't surprised. Leia was always lazy to the point of arrogance. Adrian opened the access logs next to my folder. "You extracted everything," he said. "Are you sure you want me involved in this?" I thought for a moment. About what would happen if I stayed silent. "Yes," I said firmly. He watched me for a moment. Then his tone shifted to administrative mode, cold and clean. "HR needs this. Legal needs this. And the board needs to know who's actually doing the work." We spent the next 2 hours assembling the dossier. Every document, every login log, every budget discrepancy, all printed, stamped, and signed. Around noon, he slid the completed file toward me. "I'll handle the process," he said. "You don't have to be the executioner." I placed my hand on the stack of paper, feeling the weight of the truth. "This time," I said, "I'm done fixing what they broke." I arrived late on purpose. Christmas dinner had already started when I walked through my father's door. The air was thick with cinnamon, roast beef, and the kind of laughter that sounded rehearsed. I stood in the hallway, letting melted snow from my coat drip onto the tiled floor. When Richard finally saw me, he pointed to an empty chair at the end of the table. "Sit. We're waiting," he said, his tone implying that the family picture being imperfect was my fault. My mother, Diana, scanned me as if looking for flaws. "Try not to make a scene," she muttered. I didn't answer. I took my seat at the edge of the table, half in shadow as always. Dinner continued. And then, inevitably, Leia stood up, placing a hand on Adriani's arm as if inviting applause. "I want everyone to meet my sister," she said, her voice high and bright. "This," she paused, smiling with calculated sweetness, "is our family's failure." Richard laughed first. Diana nodded. The small talk died down, replaced by a familiar, complicit silence. It was the same sound from those childhood dinners, the sound telling me to shrink away. But this time, I didn't shrink. I looked straight at Leia, at the triumphant smile on her lips, and I knew she had just signed her own death warrant. Adrian didn't laugh. He set his fork down on his plate, creating a light clink that was loud enough to freeze the room. The Christmas music seemed to cut out. He looked at Leia, looked at my parents, then slowly turned to me. "Interesting." His voice was deep and steady. "Because you're fired." The sentence dropped onto the dinner table like a stone. Leia blinked, her smile faltering. "Excuse me?" "We're done," he added, cold as a signed contract, effective immediately. Before anyone could react, Adrian reached for his tablet and connected it to the large TV in the living room. The screen lit up, casting a cold blue glow over their panicked faces. The first file appeared, the original concept document with my name in the metadata. Next to it was the access log, Leia's username glowing beside the actions: download, delete, upload. "I didn't do that." Leia started to whine. "You did," he interrupted. Next came the payments Leia had authorized for herself. Richard leaned back in his chair, his face hardening as the illusion of his perfect daughter shattered. Diana opened her mouth to say something, then shut it tight. The board received the full report this morning, Adrienne continued. HR has already processed the termination. He clicked one more time. My portfolio appeared. The campaigns I built, the projects I led, all the things hidden behind Laya's shadow for years. The reality is, he said, looking straight at my parents, Serenity is the co-founder and lead strategist of our company. She always has been. Laya recoiled as if the TV screen were burning her. You chose her over me? She hissed. I chose the truth, he replied simply. No one dared to look me in the eye. The lie they had built together collapsed right in front of them. I sat there, hands lightly clasped. My heartbeat steady. For the first time in my life, my silence didn't feel like surrender. It felt like power. I stood up, without a word, and walked out of the dining room. No one stopped me. Laya's sobbing and my father's heavy sigh were left behind as I closed the front door. Seattle didn't feel like a fresh start right away, but distance has its own kind of mercy. My new apartment is small, with clean white walls. The city outside is much quieter than that old house. No rehearsed laughter, no roles I have to play. I didn't cut my family off with a bang, I just stopped orbiting them. When the phone rings with my mother's or Laya's name, I don't block the number. I just flip the phone face down and let it vibrate until it stops. Silence can be cruel, but sometimes it's the only language they understand. On Christmas Eve a year later, I cooked dinner with a few colleagues. Afterward, sitting at my own small table, I put the best portion of food on my own plate. Hot, crispy. No one told me I wasn't worthy. No one measured my value based on someone else's appetite. That moment was very still. I used to think survival meant staying quiet long enough for someone to see me. Now I understand silence differently. It's not emptiness. It's a door I have the right to open or close. A room no one enters unless I say so. I stopped begging for a family that only claps when I fail. And once I walked away, their noise could never catch up to me again. If this story finds you, I hope you feel the ground steady beneath your feet as you walk toward a life that answers you back.